This is the Bold Artist Podcast.
You have answers and you're expressing them in your art. Your art is important and it needs to be seen.
Welcome, and let's get started with today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to the Bold Artist Podcast pilot. This is the show where Charla Maarschalk and I are here to tell you what the Bold Artist Podcast is all about. And actually, we're still figuring it out, which is part of the fun of launching this thing, isn't it, Charla?
Yes, definitely. It is. It actually is the most fun, is figuring it out.
We're in like the creative part of launching the podcast, that part behind the scenes where we're getting to infuse all of our creativity, the ideas, the hopes, dreams, and it's just all coming to life. And we're so excited to launch and have it be a weekly YouTube show and a show on all the podcast apps for artists to listen to be inspired. Tell us a little, Charla, of your heart of how you want to inspire artists through the Bold Artist Podcast.
I think my initial dream is probably why I started Bold School, probably why I started painting. I think that everybody's creative, and there's a lot of visual artists out there who don't believe that their gift, I guess we could say, is important, or that their work that they're creating is important. And I think the base foundation of the message that I want to put out into the world is that it is important and it's worth working on, it's worth talking about. So this podcast is really about encouraging and inspiring artists to believe in what they do, to believe that it's important, to understand that they're given this gift because they have a story to tell and a message to put out into the world, and that there's people out there who need to hear it because of where their life is in this moment. If, for instance, this the story I like to tell is that we've all experienced pain and suffering to some degree. It could be small, it could be huge. You've experienced pain, and it's quite possible that you've experienced triumph over that pain. And therefore, you have a story to tell in a way that you can help other people who have gone through that same kind of suffering. That's, I think, one of the best ways to explain what I mean by you have a message to share with the world, and why art can be powerful, because you have experienced something and you paint that experience, and then when somebody comes and they see it and they resonate with it, it touches their soul, and they can be changed by it in a good and a bad way. It can be negative, it can be scary as well, and it can be a sad experience. But I do believe that art is important, that good art is important. We need to share it. We need to encourage each other and inspire each other on how to do that, how to be brave and do that. So I think that's the foundation of why I wanted to start a podcast through Bold School.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've absolutely loved about being the host of this podcast is the opportunity to give artists a voice. And those that are listening get to receive that voice and grow from it and be encouraged and inspired by it, as you shared about how it's so important for artists to be telling their stories. But I have just loved giving artists the opportunity to share their voice, because most of these artists are visual artists, and so they share their voice in visual form, and this podcast allows their actual audio and physical form on YouTube to be given a voice, which I'm just so honored to be part of it.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, I don't know if I've really thought about it, even though we're playing with the tagline audio for your visual. Because artists, myself, you're probably seeing it already, I struggle with using the right words at times because I express visually. But artists have a lot to say and often don't really get an opportunity to say it. And I think one of the greatest inspirations is knowing their story. Like, how did they become an artist, and what did they overcome to become an artist? What risks did they take? Living the visual artist life, and every art form, I think, is a very brave path to take, because it's not easy and it's not understood. And I think that everyone's journey is so different. So giving a voice to artists will, I think, encourage each other and let us know that we're not alone in our journey. Might sound really cheesy, but it's true, right? It's very true. We are locked in our studios working tirelessly and endlessly by ourselves, and most of us love it. Most of us are introverts and we don't mind being alone in our studios, but it can play with our minds and we think that we are completely alone. So I think that giving the artists a voice and sharing with each other will create a community and a tribe, I think, that will allow us to understand ourselves more, or journey more, I guess.
For sure. And one thing that I found as a podcast host, and because I'm considered a super listener, which means I listen to a lot of podcasts, I consume a lot of podcasts. I know there's a lot of art-based podcasts and other shows out there, but I feel like what's making the Bold Artist podcast so unique is we do have a really strong emphasis on the boldness and the bravery and really building confidence. And I think that part, it's something that for me as an artist and creative individual, I needed that voice to come along and build up my confidence. I needed it so long ago.
Yeah.
And now is the time that we get to do that we get to build the confidence into people by drawing out artist stories. Over this last couple weeks, we've already interviewed about 8 different artists because we're building up the episodes already behind the scenes, though they're not released yet. And I've gotten to ask a lot of the questions like, what makes you bold? What makes you brave? What are your uses of bold color and bold brushstrokes? And hearing the artists share and explain the bravery that sometimes it takes a big movement, like a big scary risk. And other times they've described these small little steps that built and built and built and built into confidence. And I'm amazed, Charla, absolutely amazed already. And we've barely even begun. We haven't even launched yet. And I'm already amazed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I haven't even listened to all of these yet, just parts of them. I
know,
can't wait to listen myself.
You have a whole bunch of listening to do so that we can, edit and launch. So it's exciting to finally reveal what we've had up our sleeve, which actually started with you and I getting together for coffee late July, I guess, July 2021. And so, we got together for coffee and crazy things happen.
All the time. Every time we're together, crazy things happen.
Yeah. So that was, I think, the seed of it, where we hadn't seen each other for a long time. We go out for coffee and start to catch up on what's happening with you in Bold School and what was happening with me and my life and my sort of podcasting world. And you had this moment come over you where you had goosebumps and you were like, do you want to start a podcast? And I was like, yeah. And you were like, let's do it tomorrow. Like, no hesitation.
And then I got sick with COVID and you're like, where are you, Charla?
Yes. And then you got sick with COVID after we had made everything firm. We were doing this thing. Yeah. It was set in motion. And then suddenly Charla's like, I'm getting a COVID test. And then she gets very ill and drops off the planet for several weeks. And I say, I feel like I just took off in a jet with a pilot and I'm the co-pilot and my pilot's on the ground and I don't know where I'm going. So I just flew the plane for a few weeks.
So you just interviewed 8 artists.
Yeah, I interviewed 8 artists. I'm like, I hope I'm asking the right questions.
Yeah. It's awesome.
But yeah, no, it's gone so well, and it's actually morphed, and maybe you want to share a little of how it's morphed, because we started just thinking audio only and weekly only, and then just like creative people keep having things grow and grow and evolve, we've taken a slightly different shape. Do you want to share about that, Charla?
Yeah. So, when we met for coffee, I obviously was not thinking I was going to ask you to do a podcast with me. It wasn't on my mind. We're just going to catch up because it had been a long time and lots had happened in our lives. So I had the platform that we use for Bold School had released a new product for podcasting, and specifically, so I had been thinking through how I was going to develop a podcast. I'd wanted to do it for a while. I wasn't really loving the idea of hosting it myself, but what else was I going to do? I'm like, I'll go host it myself. I got lots to say, I suppose, I hope. And so I had made those plans. I had written it all out and made the plan. And it was sitting there having coffee and you're like, so I started a podcast. And yeah, I got goosebumps. I knew in that moment God was putting us together and that this had to happen. It was like there was no shadow of doubt. Mm-hmm. Is that the line?
Yep, that's the line. There's no shadow of a doubt.
I knew right from that second. And I think that's how I've done everything so far in my career. I just knew in that moment that was the right thing. And I was like so excited. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about, I think in essence, working together for quite a while. I kind of always knew we would. So I'm excited that we're finally getting started working together. Mm-hmm. So that's more just my personal take on that. So yeah, we hadn't thought any much past audio. But then all of a sudden I was visualizing us right here, even though I like to make lots of funny faces and fidget a lot on video, and you can't edit it out like I do with all my other stuff. But I also started thinking that a lot of our students come to us via YouTube. We are found on YouTube, and we have a good YouTube subscription right now and lots of views.
We love you, YouTube.
Yeah, yeah, YouTube is awesome. And all our subscribers are awesome. So I thought we need to give them something as well. And we are visual people. Yeah. So for me, I like to watch, when I have the opportunity, I like to be able to watch and listen. I also like to just listen at times too, but I like the option. So it kind of just evolves. Like you said, we're creative and it's going to keep evolving. So we've also had the idea of doing a regular podcast, like we know podcasts to be. And then I give credit to the great Marijanel for the idea of our daily radio show that we're still creating right now and making it ready for launch. And it will most likely be available inside of Bold School. It won't be a public option, but we are creating a daily radio show, which is technically a podcast as well. So we're working on that idea. So lots of exciting things. And who knows by the time we launch where it's actually going to be and what it's going to look like. Yeah. But this being the pilot episode, you get to watch this and then watch us evolve. Exactly. That's the cool thing, is that it grows together. We all grow together, right? We're all online, just allowing you to see what we're doing.
So at the moment, what we're doing is a weekly artist interview that will broadcast both on YouTube and on all available podcast apps, like publicly for free. And it'll be highlighting that artist, asking them key questions. So in season 1, which will take us to about January, we're talking about bold color and bold moves. A lot of the artists are portrait painters in bold color. Not all of the artists though. So there's some variety and surprises coming up. Yes. But a lot of it is in the same vein that Bold School already offers, because we have such a following in Bold School. And if you're not familiar already with Bold School, do go to boldschool.com and find out what Charla's got going on the inside, because you can learn all bold color painting inside Bold School. And so a lot of our artists are ones, like several of them mentor with inside of Bold School, and then some have been students, and others are just ones we really admire and wanted to showcase. So we are starting with the YouTube and the on the podcast apps, but then the daily radio show is something we're cooking up for the inside the Bold School community, which will be where we kind of, even though it'll be having a short daily segments, we'll also have the chance to dive deeper into like what the Bold School community is asking for and wanting, and like the heartbeat of the news and what's really relevant. And so it's a way to really immerse yourself into that community, and we can kind of grow together, like with everybody on the same page.
Yeah. And one thing in Bold School, it's almost a motto, I think, is that we don't hold back on our secrets. We tell all. Like, I see no reason why I should ever hold my secret sauce hostage so that nobody else can know what or why I'm doing something. And the radio show is a way to expand on that, because when I teach a class, or a workshop of any kind, or even a live session, you know, it's impossible to get everything out at once. And a class takes a long time to create and publish, whereas a daily radio show, we can talk about all the relevant items, the things that are happening inside our community, like, you know, that week, and the questions being asked. So it's kind of just a place where everything will be told, and there will be lots of, I think, great tips and things to glean from those conversations. We won't hold anything back.
Right.
Say that on the Daily Show.
And that is one of the things that I really appreciate and admire about my co-host here, Charla Maarschalk, and founder of Bold School. Charla and I go way back, and that's something that I think people first tuning into the podcast aren't going to realize. But Charla and I go way back, and I knew Charla. Charla, you were already a painter when I met you. You were already painting bold color portraits, but you hadn't yet started teaching in the fashion that you do, and you were still in a transition. Actually, I met you when your art was being showcased at the time we lived in a mutual city, so we both lived in Kelowna, and you were being showcased in the Kelowna Opera. Is that correct? Am I calling it the right?
Yeah, Opera Kelowna. Yeah, I was their resident artist for like 3 years. Yeah.
Yes, and that's when around the time that I first met you, and then we had the chance to travel together to Art Vancouver, and yes. I assisted setting up your show there, and I think that's where we really bonded on a lot of like art, just similar vision, and I think that's one thing I would really want to, like, I could ask you a zillion questions about yourself, but I feel like I want to tell people that Charla is the real deal. Charla is not only amazing at painting and the portraits that you see, like, she's not only like beyond talented, but her vision goes way beyond herself. It goes way beyond just wanting to be known as an artist or good at art. It goes way beyond to something that's beyond, like, out of this world. I would call it like kingdom minded. Charla really cares that every single thing she does, including Bold School, is making lasting, really long lasting impressions, not just in people's skill levels, but in like heart matters, in things that are gonna world change. And one of the things that I've loved about being friends with Charla is that every time we get together or talk, it's not just, well, it is a little bit about what's going on in our own little world, not gonna lie, but it always goes bigger than that. It goes to what is happening that's going to make impact beyond our own life, beyond my lifetime, her lifetime. And I guess, I hope I've explained it in a way that would just show the bigness of this amazing woman I'm working with and hosting a podcast for and with. That I'm honored to be here, but I also believe in her message and call that is much, much more than painting portraits.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. I'll take all those words.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And same goes for me, and why I'm so excited to have you here and be at last actually working together. I remember meeting Marijanel. No, I didn't meet you. I went to an artist talk that was being held in downtown Kelowna, and you were the artist. It was the first time I just moved to Kelowna, didn't know anybody.
Which one was that?
It was at the Streaming Cafe with...
No way!
And I think Graham Ord was there doing music with you of some kind.
Okay, the Streaming Cafe doesn't exist in Kelowna anymore, but it was a wonderful place where we did meet a lot of amazing people.
Yeah. And I had just moved to Kelowna and just decided to paint for a living. So I was terrified, but I'm like, I am starting this new journey. I need to figure this out, and I need to go to every event I can go. And I think it was like something to do with that group called Tribe House or something. I don't even know. I was never part of that.
Which doesn't exist either.
Yeah.
Or anymore.
That exists anymore. But I saw you there and you were just talking to a group of people and I met this really weird guy. He was like sitting at the table with me having coffee. I'm like, you're weird. I don't want to be like you. You're one of those weird artists.
Well, one of the things about Charla and I is we do seem to gravitate to that type of thing when we're out in public, because when we were having coffee in July, when the whole spark of the podcast happened, a woman actually pulled up to our table. Like, she like sat there with us for a while. And Charla and I were like, awkward. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Anyway, that just kind of happens to us.
Yeah.
But anyway, what was I talking about at this artist talk?
So you were giving this talk and I don't fully remember what it was, but what I remember you talking about was your pottery, because Marijanel is an incredible potter, and you were talking about your pottery and you sang a song that you wrote. I think it's available on YouTube somewhere. I think we could find it.
Oh, and then if Graham was there, he probably played the guitar.
So you probably played the song.
Yeah.
And you just told your story and told what it meant to you being a potter and what that meant in your faith and how you understood the Creator so much more through your pottery. I'm not going to give any of that justice, but it was so inspiring. And I was still starting the journey is I'm going to do art. I finally realized that this is what I'm going to do and I'm going to take it on, and it's a huge risk, but I was still terrified. I didn't know what it meant. And you spoke into that. I think you spoke into me about that very thing that night because of how you spoke about the metaphor of pottery and how it made you understand your faith more. I'm not going to try and pretend I know what you said.
It really
it was inspiring.
Yeah.
Really inspiring. And I was like, who is this girl? And then we had mutual friends, and I think we started, we had like that artist get together at Jessica Balfour's studio downtown, and I think we probably really met for the first time and talked there. And I just love, I think more so than painting, I love the meaning behind the things that we create. You know, like I love watching a movie and it's entertaining and it's beautiful and, you know, the lighting is great, but what is the meaning? What is the message? There's always a message behind, there's always a message behind everything that's created. Maybe some of those like action-packed movies that my kids watch might not have story. I don't know if they have stories or meanings, but you know, most art has meaning. And so I love those types of discussion more than I love talking about the color red that I'm using. I like to talk about why I'm using red, what its meaning or what part of the message it is. And that's what our discussions always had. And then I remember years later, I know I might be rambling a bit now, but I'm going through my timeline in my head. Years later, where we had discussed, like, what are we going to do? We need to, like, talk about this. We need to get this out into the world. We need to gather people together. Was this the time we drove over
to Coca-Cola? At
Probably.
Night? Okay.
Yeah, at night. And we had big, deep talks. And you told me all your crazy stories about your art world, life in general.
Which I do have a lot of crazy stories. And that is basically what my other personal podcast is about, is just like the crazy Marijanel
You have to go
stories.
Listen to the Marijanel's memoirs.
It's not released yet, but it's also in the works. So anyway, so we were driving and going to these deep levels.
Yeah, and talking about like what can we do? Like how can we encourage other people in the same vision that we had? And then it led to you recording yourself talking about a character in the Bible called Bezalel, I believe. And I knew nothing about this guy, but he's apparently a multiform artist.
I can't believe you remember my Bezalel.
Yeah, and you sent me these recordings. And I'm like, this lady was born to preach. Like, and it was just so inspiring.
Just saying that some of my, like, where the roots grow of me, what I'm going to call podcasting, is my dad says I sat on the stairs. We lived in a little townhouse growing up, and I would sit on the stairs with a little tape recorder, and I would push the record and preach at the recorder. And I would preach everything I learned in, you know, Sunday school or daycare or whatever. I would just like talk to the recorder. And I still have some of those tapes in a memorabilia box. And so I was made to do this. But with that in mind, I know you had something to finish there, Charla. I felt like you're not quite done, but I want to tell everyone while I was saying I was born to do this. Podcast hosting, speaking. Charla met me while I was speaking. There was a number of years of my life that I felt my voice was silenced. And that came through exactly all the same obstacles, hurdles, difficulties that I feel like most artists deal with. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I feel like now interviewing artists and hearing them share their stories, I feel like I so identify to their stories. It might be different paths, different circumstances, but when you're made to do something, there will be resistance and there will be the squashing or like that dampening of the light, or that trying to squash out the let your little light shine thing. I don't know if I'm making sense now, but with that ramble, I'm saying there was many years where I felt that my voice was dampened within me, and that now stepping back into doing what I was made to do, it's not always easy, but it's that you're meant to do it. You're called to do it. And it's people like Charla and even people who with stories like myself of overcoming those things that are going to help to mentor and bring artists to places of freedom and new life and new inspiration. Mm-hmm. Anyway, you may continue your story.
I love that. I mean, it's so inspiring. And it's neat because you can sort of see that evolution of where you were as this little girl, who I was seeing you being, and now being a podcast host, like where you're going to be in 10 years. You just don't know that journey. And other people can put on you what you're going to be. So somebody might have seen you preaching on the stairs and say, you've got to go into the church and do something. They'll put you in a box, but we need to be able to allow our own story to be created. And that artists, I think many artists will probably be able to say that they felt their voices were silenced. As artists, we're told that it's not a worthwhile thing. You're not going to make money. What's it matter? What's it going to do for the world? You're not paving new roads so that people can drive to new cities. They don't look at it as practical. So I love that story. I think so many people will resonate, and that's one of the amazing reasons you're here. I think that you were made to be here for this time. All I was going to say basically was that when you sent me this recording of you talking about Bezalel, and I have no idea why you sent it to me or what that was about.
Me either.
There was like 2 or 3 like 20-minute things, and I listened to them. I'm like, I learned so much. I was so inspired. And I remember thinking, like, this girl's voice is amazing. Like, she's so nice to listen to, and you're so eloquent in speech and all of those types of things. And I don't know why I was thinking all that. That wasn't anything in my life, but I had all those thoughts. And that day, having coffee in July, when the podcast came on and all of these light bulbs started going off, that recording that you sent me that day came into my mind. And I was like, yeah, she has such a beautiful voice, so many deep thoughts. And you have such empathy for all artists of all kinds, of all mediums. And I think you have some kind of a gift to understand and to see into all those worlds. Whereas I think that I see in a very specific space, and I move around a little bit, and I understand and appreciate art at different levels and different mediums. But I do have a very focused space, and I teach in that space, and I paint in that space. But something I absolutely love about you is your ability to understand all artists of all levels, of all mediums, and be able to draw things out of them and see deep things in them, see their worth, and all that stuff. So that's what came together that day. And I was like, do you want to do a podcast? It's going to be so much fun.
And I said, yes, absolutely. And I came home and told my husband, and he's like, you were made to do this. And Charla's really smart because she knows you were made to do this. Yeah. So I was like, here I am.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been without its technical difficulties. We've definitely run into some techie issues, and I've appreciated even Charla's grace and humor and ability. Like we've made it through the techie bumps of launching pretty smoothly. We've done pretty good there. And yeah, I thank you for your recognition and appreciating those things about my multiform artistry, Charla. I do refer to myself as a multiform artist and a creativity mentor. That's kind of how I sum it up for people, but there really isn't any way to describe all the, I guess I call them branches of my artistic expressions over the years, because I was born creative. I call myself a highly creative individual, not just like there's a lot who go through life being creative and crafty and artsy, but Marijanel has functioned on like a very high maintenance creative level, having to create every day. And so I lived my 20s in sort of the music, singing, songwriting, recording world. And that is where I got a lot of my start, even in what I call my broadcasting experience, doing voiceovers and recording, which is now so useful in starting to podcast. It's also where I learned all the software and the ability to edit and understand basic audio editing. Was through all those recording studio years, which the studio years, the music years I call them, kind of morphed into a photography decade. I had a portrait photography, which is also something, a portrait photography business, and it's something that you and I immediately clicked on that level because you did as well. So we understand the pains of giving up our summers for weddings. Yes. And the just all that comes with that whole photo business. But the 10 years I spent in the photo business, I really believe is what formed me as a visual artist. And that those visual artist years then gave way to, I started to hobby in clay on the side, just more of a creative relief. Didn't really mean to become known as a potter, and it happened, and that happened at the time when I lived in Kelowna near you, through all those mutual circles that we were sharing a few minutes ago. And it just kind of took off and happened for me. And when my clay work began to become recognized, I was like, well, hey, if people want to know me as a potter and not a photographer, well, I guess that's what I'm doing. And so I embraced it and went with that for about 7 years. There was an overlap of time where I was kind of known as both photographer and potter. Although my pottery ended up being more sculpting. I'm not sure if we want defined descriptions, but it ended up going into the sculpting realm. And then I really was faced with the decision of needing to close down the big kilns. And I had an amazing workshop, and for practical reasons, we were going to sell that property, and just kind of came to the decision that I needed to shut the big, grand studio down. And it was a sacrifice, but it was also a welcomed sacrifice, because I thought, well, I'm going to give this up and something new is going to come. Because when we close one door, another will open. When we say no to one thing, we make room for a yes, if that makes sense. And I didn't know what that would be, but I had a hunch it was painting. But I also didn't know that through taking that step, my voice would come back. And I say that metaphorically. That voice that I mentioned kind of got squashed all those years. I feel like the visual arts have been a reprieve for my voice, a way that I was just still able to express, even though I had no words that I could articulate anymore. That I like how I did in my 20s when I was prolific with songwriting, singing, speaking, on all of these things. There had been some wounds and some things, like you talked about, everyone going through different pains and then needing to heal, and how we're giving artists voices. That all happened to me through the course of all of these different mediums. And I look back, and it's not about the medium necessarily that I practiced. It was all leading to just understanding freedom of expression, freedom of using our voice, freedom of creativity, being who we're made to be being brave, being courageous, all the things that the Bold Artist podcast is talking and going to be talking about. It's pretty full circle for me to come back to this point where a lot of what I've been through is starting to make sense. And I know that, you know, I just shared bits of my story, but I know, Charla, you have been through a lot in your realm of art. You said you create in this certain space, but in your space, you have experienced big and very powerful, amazing things have happened within your space in Bold School, and then also not without its trials and difficulties that you are seeing transformation and restoration and all these amazing things happen as well. So it's pretty special times.
Yeah, definitely. And see, that story that you just told, I think that's why you're going to make such an incredible podcast host. So much experience behind you, and you're still so young.
Oh, I might look young here, you know, in front of the ring light, and but yeah, when I wake up in the morning, I know I'm in my 40s.
Yeah, but I mean, looking at that experience and all that you've learned and all the wisdom, because I know you've processed those things, being able to talk to other artists, that's I think why you're so good at it. And I think what is going to make everything here so special, because you're not just a TV personality or whatever. This is who you are. This message. You've got a voice. You're an artist. You've been through the ringer on things, and you've seen success on things. And I think that's what's going to make you such an incredible host.
And it's very special for me to join into the space we were talking about, this space that you have started called Bold School, and Charla.
Yeah.
And to join forces with you has been pretty cool. So now that we've shared all this, I don't know if we'll be releasing this in a couple of different segments, or if this will all be released as one big story. That's the creative part that Charla and I get to talk about behind the scenes. But what's really, I guess, what we come back to is that this new venture, this new part of Bold School, which is the Bold Artist podcast, is created by two artists who desire for artists to live their fullest, most inspired, most encouraged life possible. We really want to see you whole and fully functioning how you were made to function as an artist. And in that desire, as we interview and bring others into the spotlight to share their story, it's because we believe in artists, and that we believe that you were made to be who you are. And I think that's something that I just love about Charla, is that deep belief I was telling you about earlier, that she believes in so much more than just herself. It goes way beyond. And that's why I'm here, because I'm very, very excited about that vision and the vision behind Bold School and the way it's changing lives. Yes.
Yeah, you're gonna get to meet and talk to so many different people. I think it's gonna be amazing, and I get to listen.
She gets to listen and say, eh.
Yeah.
Edit that.
Cut that out.
Cut that out. Edit that.
Well, I kind of just liked what you said. You said like the whole part of the artist or whatever. Funny, not really funny story. You might not think it's funny, but
funny, not haha.
Yeah. I think it's funny. You might think I'm lame, but I homeschooled for a few years, and I loved this book that I read called The Wholehearted Child, and how they describe why I love homeschooling was not just because you don't just bring your kid out of school and teach them academically. You get to teach their whole self how to live in every aspect of life. And I think that's lacking in schools. But anyways, that's a whole other story. My kids are in school now. But I just love this idea of the wholehearted child. And so when I was trying to describe what Bold School is, what the podcast, what my dream for the podcast to be is, or our dream for the podcast. I'm trying to describe this to my family, and I'm like, it's the wholehearted artist.
I love that.
My husband is like, that's the worst thing ever. Don't ever say that. Don't ever put that out there.
Oh, Ryan.
It's so cheesy and it's so terrible, but
I
that's
love
what
it.
it is. It's about the whole aspect of the artist is what makes our art amazing. It's not just learning the right brush or the right brushstroke, though I think skill and practice and study is so important. That's why Bold School is there. Because I do believe there's a lot of artists out there who don't have skill. And for some reason, it's okay for artists not to have skill, but it's not okay for musicians not to have skill. Nobody wants a musician on stage that has never learned how to sing or play an instrument. So I boldly believe in skill and practice and study. But anyone can learn how to paint a beautiful face. That's one of my lines. It's all about integrating the whole artist into the story. And all our fears are not usually you think it's about, can I paint an eye? But it's not really, can I paint an eye? It's, can I present that eye to the world? What does that eye mean? And what are other people going to think about that eye? And how am I going to talk about that eye? And should I just burn it all down now? You know, like,
Yeah.
So anyways, you'd said something about the whole artist, and I remembered that statement. It's still so true. It's about the wholehearted artist, no matter how cheesy and lame that sounds. That's what it's kind of about.
That might have to be the title of season 2.
The wholehearted artist.
You just
see.
You just let your husband know that.
Yeah. If you guys all like it,
Yeah.
comment and tell us you like it.
Yeah, just hit that thumbs up and we'll make sure that...
Or the thumbs
that we
down.
have-
Totally
we'll have
open to the thumbs down.
We'll have the wholehearted artist.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, thank you all for joining us and listening to the heart behind how the Bold Artist podcast is getting started, what our hopes and dreams for this launch, and hearing a little bit more about who Charla is. And Charla, thank you for so kindly introducing me and sharing a little bit more about who I am. And so we are just super excited to bring you the Bold Artist podcast. So stay tuned, and YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe and the thumbs up. I think thumbs up is better than the thumbs down. Hey, Charlotte?
Probably better.
And once we're launched, you can find us on all the podcast apps is what I'm trying to say. So you can head over to your favorite podcast app and search up the Bold Artist podcast and hit follow, and you can leave reviews there as well. So thanks so much, everyone. Stay tuned.
I just want to say one more thing. Thank you, everybody, as well. And this is the official introduction of Marijanel as part of the Bold School team. So I just want to officially welcome you into the Bold School community and Bold School world, Marijanel.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we are so honored to have you on our team. I feel so honored to have you on our team. And one reason why she's here and hosting this and not me is because she asked for thumbs up, not thumbs down. So, Charlotte, get off the podcast. You're ruining our marketing.
We're going to get thumbs up, Charlotte.
Yeah. So thank you, Marijanel.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure to be here. See you later, everybody.
Bye.